Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Jay Encarnacion, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind successful startups, the challenges faced along the way, and the strategies driving their future expansion. Today, we're excited to have Ollie Sr., the CEO of Concision Global Consulting. Russell is here to share his founding story, how his firm tackles operational excellence and business transformation, and his vision for scaling this impactful consulting business launched in 2023. So let's jump right in. Russell, welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you to yourself and to your listeners, and I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. Honored to have you on today. Super excited to get into it a little bit here with you. So take us back to the beginning here, Russell, for our listeners. What specific problem in the operational excellence or business transformation space really inspired you to start Concision Global Consulting?
Great question. I think to give you a little more framing or context for why we started this operation, I will probably give you a little about my career journey, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I spent the first decade or so of my career in software, right? So I started off as a software engineer and then moved into a consulting role, basically doing systems implementation work for a lot of banks and financial services and insurance companies, if you will. Did that until about 2000, 2001, when we had the whole .com implosion. So all those organizations that went out of business almost overnight. Took a role at Toshiba initially to help them fix an IT PMO. But they also looked at my background in education and management science and postgraduate experience and things like TQM and Lean.
Yeah.
Said, hey, maybe you could be the person who runs what was their business excellence or management innovation function, as they called it, for the Americas. And that's what happened. 6 weeks into my tenure, they gave me that program. And that's really what started me on the journey I've been on for the last 20 plus years, right? And so that operation is the first place where I learned the disciplined methodologies, database approaches to either making something better, improving something, or creating something from scratch. Right? So that first program was around improving, innovating. The third leg we added was on strategy deployment, right? So how do I take strategic objectives and cascade them in a way that makes sense at different levels of an organization? How do I get disparate functions to move in the same direction? And I've done variations of that ever since, right? These programs tend to last 2, 3, 4 years on average, right? So a leader will come in with a strategic imperative, realize they need some new capabilities when it comes to execution. And I've been kind of building or fixing these programs ever since, right? So from Toshiba, what brought me here to the Seattle area was Microsoft, and in theory to do the same thing. Microsoft is where I actually had to learn bottoms up. So Toshiba was top down, Microsoft was bottoms up. After Microsoft, I spent about 4 years with what used to be the parent company at eBay and PayPal. They had a lot of companies under that brand, the organization. And I was a pig in a trough, right? So I had the opportunity to either help or fix or restart a program that would fit the culture of each company under that umbrella. And that was, overall an exciting and challenging environment because of the variety of deployment models, different levels of maturity, different cultures, depending on where the company was based, et cetera. So if you're in the space or like doing business improvement, it doesn't get much better than having the opportunity to work on the full gamut of deployment models and resources and challenges for businesses. Did that until about 2015 when we broke the companies apart. So the parent company was dissolved in 15, looking for a challenging firm or a challenging opportunity. The most broken thing I could find at that point in time was General Motors. And so they needed some help with their overall OpEx or transformation program. So I'll help them with their strategy, if you will. We helped to architect a 5-year plan. That program is now winding down in year 10, right? It has delivered over $10 billion of incremental EBITDA to the corporation. But these programs are much more than just dollars. It's really around how do I change or how do we change how work is done, right? So what makes us a little bit different and where this journey really started for me, a couple of years ago, I was interviewing with a firm that needed this sort of help. So they needed a new president. I missed the job by this much. The CEO gave it to another person. Wow. But then he leaned in and asked the other person to come work with Russell to fix their problems, right? And so I took some great people I knew from my past and said, hey, let's go help this organization. And that's what really started this firm, right? So I got very lucky in that sense, right? That the firm kind of, or the opportunity landed in my lap with my initial client. And so we spent about 9 months initially fixing something in the core operation and then expanded to support services as well, like HR for that org, if that makes sense. But
Absolutely.
that's really what started this journey, was taking those capabilities that we built across the different industries and different levels of organizations, and realizing every organization has problems, right? There's not a company of any size that doesn't have a need to improve what it does for the customer or drive better profitability for how they execute internally, et cetera.
Absolutely. So walk us through, Russell, with that. With that being said, and with that in mind, how has your offer evolved thus far? So what you provide and who you serve, how's that changed since you guys first launched?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the interesting aspects of how we started this firm is a deficiency, right? We over-indexed on people like myself who are execution people, people who are doers. And so what that really means is we had a lack of expertise in sales and marketing. So our core offering hasn't really changed, right? But how we approach the market has definitely changed. And so if you go to our website, you'll see there's a section where we have project highlights, kind of things that people have done in the past.
Right.
It's very broad. And so our initial focus was too broad, right? We were trying to solve world hunger and bring world peace with our
Right.
approach, because we can take these capabilities, we can apply them to anywhere in an organization to make something better, right? It's basically an application of scientific method to improve something, right? To go from a
Hmm.
qualitative to a quantitative understanding, understand root causes, pick the right solution, and make sure it makes a difference long term. But that made it very difficult, right? It made it very difficult for us to think about how do we market or provide services to prospects in the marketplace. So what has evolved, what has changed is we've gone from, hey, tell us your problem so we can help you, to focusing in a specific space, right? And so I'm sure you have seen, or your listeners have seen, a lot of interest, a lot of mind share around things like return to office mandates, right? Some of the challenges that have been there with getting people to come back to the office, particularly in the post-pandemic world. And so we said, hey, there's a place where we can kind of lever up and share some of our capabilities around measurement, right? And so we've decided to take a lot of what we do and kind of constrain it in something called workforce productivity solutions, or WPS. And really, what that means is for any part of the organization, whether it's a core supporting or management process,
Mhm.
we're saying, hey, let's bring some capabilities to the table to forecast what is the actual demand to meet the output of that process, share what the actual throughput looks like real time, but also talk about where is the bottlenecks and waste, right? So, because there's a lot of waste in every process, right? Things that happen that are necessitating rework or over processing, whatever it is. We can measure that, and we can help an organization understand in total across the org where is your opportunity to make things better, right? So that's where workforce productivity solutions with WPS comes in. That's our focus, right? And so we've gone from we have broad capabilities to how do we apply those capabilities in a very specific space, right? That space is driving productivity. It's not return to office. That was just kind of where we started with conversations and to bring some people to the table. But it really is, hey, how do I actually quantitatively know that my people are engaged in delivering good outcomes as
Right.
an organization? Not just, hey, I see Jay in the office, that means Jay's doing good work, or Jay's not in the office, I don't know what's going on.
Right.
Because the reality was, we realized that leaders weren't really truly measuring productivity pre or post pandemic, right? They were
Mm.
using proxy measures around, well, I see this person, so therefore they must be doing something productive. When
Right.
Russell or Jay were in the office goofing off on LinkedIn and having wasting time in meetings where we shouldn't be, and that sort of
Yeah.
thing was still happening. So that's what's really evolved for us, is we're really focused on workforce productivity solutions. So the ability to not just measure, but also improve, right? So measurement is not new. There's plenty of tools and capabilities to measure what's happening from an activity perspective. What's different is where we bring in the AI piece, right? So how do you optimize? How do you actually identify and remove the waste that's in your process? That's where we're focused today. So that's the evolution for us. It's going from a broad focus to really a specific space around productivity improvement. If that makes
I
sense.
love it. I love it. So talk to us a bit here, Russell. What's a misconception that people often have about the consulting industry, especially around lean management, something on that front that you'd like to address that you hear pretty often?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I wouldn't even say it's a misconception. I think it's actually fairly accurate that the majority of consulting investments that organizations make are not truly fruitful.
Mm,
That's not to say you didn't hire smart people and they didn't deliver some insights, but the ability of organizations to actually absorb and do something like that is pretty low, right? And so I think a lot of the traditional name brand management consultancies are great at creating PowerPoints, right? And putting beautiful thoughts and beautiful slides and graphics on a page. And my own personal experience when I first ran into those outcomes was most organizations can do anything with it, right? And so it wasn't that these weren't great pie in the sky ideas that were accurate. It was very low ability to actually implement or do something with those insights because you're still stuck in the constraints of your daily organization that didn't have the capacity to meet customer service experiences or
mhm.
expectations, or you're still stuck in the constraints of not being able to supply or manage your supply chain sufficiently, let alone think about a whole new world of possibilities of how you're going to do business differently. So I think that's accurate. What's different in how we approach it, we call ourselves essentially the unconsultants, if that makes sense, right? And so there's kind of two or three things that are a little bit different about our organization. One are if you hire a traditional manager consultancy, they're going to deploy a team of maybe 3 or 4 people. Typically, there's an analyst who's fairly fresh out of undergrad. You'll get a senior analyst who's probably a couple of years out of business school, and you'll get a project or an engagement manager who's got 5 to 7 years of industry experience. Smart people, they will eventually deliver something that's pretty on page, if that makes sense. Looks really great and impressive, but your organization typically can't do much with it, right? In terms of actually knowing how to change how work is done, how to actually remove the waste or the investment that's going into the trash can, so you can actually now afford to invest in doing something different, building up new systems and people skills, etc. That's what we do, right? We're the folks you call when, hey, what's next? How do I actually make my execution work better? So we call this the CGC advantage. It starts with a deployment team that looks like me, right? We take people who have 25 plus years of hands-on experience making things better. We build teams of those people, right? And we start remote first. If you start remote first, you have access to a much broader talent pool, right? There's a lot of folks who reach, 25, 30 years of experience who are not looking for their next 60-hour-a-week, 10-year job, right? And so they want to capitalize on the expertise they have. We bring those people to the table. So we bring a team of 3 or 4 people who look like me, 25 plus years of experience doing things hands-on, right? That means we're very pragmatic. So we know just kind of the minimal things you need to use or engage with to drive a result. And so the combination of expertise of doing things hands-on, pragmatic experience in terms of how to actually get the buy-in and make the change stick, we like to say that we can deliver better results in about half the time for a quarter of the cost, right? And that's because we're much more focused on, hey, how do I change this process? How do I remove this waste? And that's what we deliver instead of PowerPoints. If that makes sense. So I think it is accurate to feel that many consultancies don't actually drive the impact they should or the investment that firms deliver. Does that make
Beautiful.
sense?
That definitely makes perfect sense. So yeah, I mean, so it's clear as day, you guys, how you're generating revenue, your kind of core offer there, how it's structured for your clients, where your focus is. So talk to us a little bit here, Russell. What does the acquisition side look like for you guys? What's working really well for you up to this point to get
So
to get
it's a
new
fair
clients?
question. That's a really good question. I hesitate to say it works well, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
right, we went through a lot of experiments, if that makes sense, right?
Yes.
Learning on the fly, that makes sense. And so, I'm sure many of your listeners are far ahead of me on this, right? They understand the difference between, for example, cold versus warm network marketing, right? And
Yeah.
so we spent too much effort early on things like cold market development, right? So
Gotcha.
there's a role for that in terms of long-term brand and equity building, if that makes sense. But
Right.
what we focus on more recently is warm network development. Right? So we still have people who are doing things like sending out emails for us, and they're doing LinkedIn outreach and making phone calls. That's the cold market stuff. It's much more long-term and much less fruitful. What we're focused on is primarily how do we think about relationship development, right? And so our business is a service business and it's in the B2B space, right? And so for that, you really need to understand, or people need to understand who you are, right? They need to understand who you are for they're willing to actually talk about what are the challenges and think about maybe buying something from you, right? Or engaging with you. So to that end, what works for us, we believe, is actually some of the things we're doing now with some thought leadership and then pushing out content. You may have seen some of our content on LinkedIn around workforce productivity solutions. We're
Right.
following that up with understanding who are the right people in our ideal client profile, right? Our ICP, if you will, and starting to build relationships, right? And now most of those relationships are going to be done face to face. So we're working on what are the right conferences to join and participate in. Traditionally, we might have gone to things that were more in the space of a practitioner. One of the things we've done differently, I didn't allude to earlier, is a little bit of an industry focus. So before we were
Gotcha.
very broad, now we said, hey, what are the 3 or 4 or 5 industries that have the most need? Where's the most operational internal waste? And so now we're looking at what are the right conferences inside of
Right.
public administration, financial services, retail. I think I've missed one in there somewhere. Healthcare, right? And so those are kind of the rich spaces that we're playing in now, and we're thinking about what does relationship development look like here, right? What are the virtual roundtables we're going to invite leaders to, so they can talk to their peers who are in the same space with same problems. Podcasts, what we're doing here today, right? Podcasts are actually an activity or an opportunity to build relationships, right? So that's another thing for us that we're starting to engage with is, hey, how do we invite people from our ICP to actually have conversations and build relationships, right? It's really about learning who we are before we can have a trusted conversation. So that's really where we are today.
Amazing. And have you guys tried anything with like ads on LinkedIn or anything of that nature at all? See success there?
Good question. You mentioned LinkedIn. LinkedIn is clearly the avenue for engagement. It is
Yes.
obviously very commercial, extremely commercial, but for a B2B business is kind of where it is. And we have done ads. They have not been fruitful, to be frank, right? So we can, you can sell content or buy content. You can boost your publications. You can get big numbers, but maybe we don't have the right call to action. Perhaps that's it. Maybe it's the channel. We don't know. We think, to be frank, a lot of this is the market.
Yes.
We have a lot of prospects who are talking to who have suddenly gone dead.
Yes.
To give you an example, one we were working with, a lot of their business is through government contracts. And so they were planning on some growth challenges.
Right.
And suddenly their existing business went away because the government stopped paying them, right? And so now they're laying off hundreds of folks in the operations space. That story has been repeated for us on the business development front. So I believe some of what we're seeing, to be frank, is not so much that the economic indicators are calamity, it's more that people are waiting for the other shoe to drop. A lot of folks who were planning to spend capital in 2025 are now sitting on the sidelines, not sure what to do because of a lot of the perturbations that are coming out of, frankly, DC these days. So it's been a challenge, but we're going to stick with it, right? We know that we have something valuable to add from a impact perspective.
Right.
It's just a matter of making sure we can fine tune how we talk to the market and being there at the right time when the market does come back.
Yeah. So I mean, so with that, explain to us a little bit. What does this sales process for you guys look like? So are you taking someone from initial contact with a client to signing them to a deal with you? Is that something you're doing on your own? I know you said you have a team that's doing outreach. Do you have a sales?
Great question. Yeah, it's the answer is kind of A, B, and C. All the options you can think of, right? So there's been scenarios where we use our own networks of people and we guided them through the business development process and qualified them as a lead and hopefully get them to sign as a contract as a client. In some cases, no, it's come back next quarter, but they're in our pipeline, right? Majority of our volume has come from service providers that we've hired, right? And so I've hired at different firms over time to do different things. Early on, we had a very fragmented approach, right? So we had ourselves doing internal networking with our own contacts, kind of people we knew in our own network. We had a firm that was doing phone calls, right? And so they would call people who were in our ICP. We have a full-time employee who does a lot of our digital email messaging and outreach, if you will. And so it was kind of scattered. Then we started hiring organizations that do end-to-end digital marketing, right? What's the strategy? And then they work with us on the campaigns and do the outreach through email, LinkedIn, phone calls, that sort of thing, right? So we've done a variety of things, and we also have a firm that strictly does marketing inside of LinkedIn.
Right.
To be frank, we have a significant volume of contacts, very low conversion, right? Now, how much of that is us versus the market? We can't tell because we're so new. We just don't know, right? But we've done a variety of things, but most of those things, to be frank, are kind of cold market network. We believe that we need to do a lot more of the warm market development first.
Makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. So what would you point to with that? I know there's a couple different things there, but what would you point to as the biggest bottleneck to growth right now? Would it be that lead generation, converting those leads? What would you say is the biggest bottleneck for you right now?
It absolutely is lead generation, right? So qualified lead generation. So there's a lot of great database tools. We're using those. We can go out for most companies and find, who's the head of operations or who is the COO, right? And learn all about them in the company. But that's not a real, that's not a lead, right?
Yeah.
That's a prospect. Lead generation is the challenge for scaling for a B2B services business. At some point, when you figure out that pipeline, how to actually generate leads, then sales will come. Sales is just a numbers game from my perspective, right? If you can work on the front end of your pipeline, understand how people make buy decisions in your space, and really master that, then sales will come, right? You will progress people through the pipeline. It's just a numbers game. And yes, sales is a process, it is work, but it's really not that front end, right? And so for us, it's lead generation.
Gotcha. Gotcha. All right. So let's talk about, your vision. Obviously, it's clear as day that you are extremely intelligent. You're passionate about what you're doing. You know that there's value here. So what are your top priorities, Russell, for growing Concision over the next 6 to 12 months? What are you laser focused on?
Right now, I mean, it's just continuation of our conversation. It is definitely lead generation, right? So there are other things to do, right? Like, hey, we'd love to revise our website. We're doing some small incremental changes, but really at this point, it is about lead generation. That's the only thing that really matters for this business. And even long term, when
Yeah.
things go better with pipeline health, it's going to be about pipeline health, right? So
Yes.
how do I keep the pipeline health green, right? And so how do I escalate and put bigger targets on the front line and get better quality prospects and make sure I'm doing good things on the back end to get repeat business? But end of the day, it's going to be about a quality or healthy pipeline for us, right? And so I can't imagine that's not the case for any young services business at this point.
Right. Absolutely. So on that same front there, Russell, what do you personally see as the consulting industry as a whole and its evolution in the coming years? And with that, how are you positioning yourself to take advantage of that evolution?
Good question. And clearly, right now, there's a lot of interest in AI, right? And so,
Yes.
how is that? I won't call it flavor of the day because I think there is some efficacy for leveraging some of these capabilities long term. But that said, how do we think about what these capabilities mean for our industry? Honestly, I hope, and this is part of what we hope to drive as well, we believe it's going to be easier for organizations that do invest in what I'll call productivity capabilities using
Yeah.
AI to do what I'll call, for the most part, desktop execution quicker, better, easier, cheaper, right? That's a good thing. The challenge will still remain with kind of the cross-functional stuff, right? So I've got an end-to-end activity, right? Record to report, procure to pay, whatever it happens to be. How do you actually make that run better, right? And that's where the opportunity for us and others will be, is still around, hey, how do I leverage some of these capabilities to more quickly classify current as is performance, how I work around across multiple systems and manual processes to get a better understanding of what the as is looks like. And then the bigger piece is the optimization, right? And so how do I actually do something about it? Not just say, hey, this is broken, or here's how much waste we have. How do I actually do something with it? And that's where things are going to change for organizations that invest in operational excellence as well as consultants, right? You're going to be able to leverage some of these capabilities to at least get started. Now, Russell's perspective, the work of changing people is still going to be hard.
Yes.
Nobody ever raises their hand and says, come change me.
Yes.
They'll say, hey, we have a problem. There's a challenge here. But nobody says, change me, right? Change my org. We know that. So that change management is still a need. That doesn't go away, right? But some of the tools and capabilities will make us give us the ability to run faster and to run sure, because we'll have the ability to compare ourselves or our capabilities against, in some cases, external markers, but even against internal, historical markers, right? And so I can build a model using all of my external, or so my internal capabilities and outcomes over many years to start thinking about how I can do better, right? And so that's one of the unique capabilities that we're working with as well, is how do I provide insight inside of my own firewall around where my opportunities are for optimization?
Absolutely. All right. And just to round us out here, I mean, this has been incredibly informative. I know our listeners are taking so much of this, and I really think you're going to get, some good traction with that as well, because it's clear as day what you bring to the table is needed here. So just to round us out here, last question for you, Russell. What is a piece of advice that you can offer to our listeners right now, other founders, entrepreneurs, really wanted to hit the ground running like you have? What's something you can offer them before we wrap up?
I think it's easy to get distracted by all the things you have to do to create a viable enterprise, and there's a lot, right? And
Yeah.
so, but I think the key thing is, as quick as you can, understand how buy decisions are made in your environment and your organization or your
Mm,
industry, and then start metering or quantifying what you are spending your time on, right? So, can you actually quantify the impact of what you're doing and how it relates to understanding your sales cycle or your buy cycle? Everything else you should minimize, right? So really laser focus on how do I actually work business development and build a healthy pipeline. You can find people to develop a website, or you know what, just create a basic website. Right? There's nothing wrong with a good basic starter website, and move on from there. You can add content later on. You'll start adding insight pieces and publish content, that sort of thing. But it really is about prioritizing. Right? Can I actually understand of the 20 things I'm doing today, which two or three are really the ones that are most impactful, and do more of that and less of the other things. Right. So I think the ability to prioritize is the one thing I'd actually give as advice, and is prioritize and quantify what's the impact of what I'm doing. Right. Not
absolutely.
just qualitatively think this is important, but can I trace that to business development markers or goals or customer satisfaction goals, whatever they are for your strategy.
Incredible. Incredible. Well, with that right there, that is going to wrap us up and have another inspiring episode in the books of Founders Future. Russell, just want to thank you again. I mean, incredible journey so far. It's clear as day again how insightful you are, how intelligent you are, and you really get to impact a ton of businesses with what you're bringing to the table. I'll be following you along. I know you're going to have an amazing journey, and I'm excited to see you grow. To our listeners, if you did enjoy this episode, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also find more resources and insights at closers.io, where we're dedicated to helping businesses accelerate their sales through trained appointment setters and world class marketing systems. Until then, keep climbing, and we'll see you on the next one.